Hello, hello, friends. Welcome to the Friday conversation, and hope everyone had a great week. And we are here today, or this week's topic is our top 5 favorite second book of a series, if that makes sense. So we're going to go around the room and share one, and we'll discuss them and defend them to the death, and try to justify each book's place on said list. So, Varsha, will you start us off with an introduction, please?
Hello, my name is Varsha. I run the YouTube channel Reading by the Rainy Mountain, where I host discussion groups of books that I like to read and want everybody else to read. And you can find me on the Patreon forum, on the podcast Speculative Speculations as well. Jared.
Hi, I'm Jared, and I run the Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel, and I'm also on Speculative Speculations with these fine folks here, and a bunch of other page-chewing.com podcasts. Chris?
Yes, my name's Chris Moen from the Chronicle of Chris YouTube channel, which only I get the chance to make content when I'm not doing streams with you fine people. So it's been empty for the past couple of weeks. But you can find me on those said podcasts like Speculative Speculations and the like, and other Patreon forums. And I have to say, after I've something when I seen this topic, I was like, and I started preparing for it. I just like reading book ones. You know, just book one after book one after book one after book one. So I was looking at all these series that I really like, and I was like, I've never read book 2 of them. So this could be interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah. Book 2s are hard to pull off, I think. There's a lot of pressure with second books.
Yeah.
So our friend Thomas J. Devins and Drew also shared their list, so we'll add them in. But
Alex
Thomas,
also shared his
And Alex as well.
Oh, Alex did too? Oh, okay,
yep,
cool.
he did.
I'll bring up the thread. But Thomas had, and go read Thomas's books. Scrounger is his latest novella. He had a question for everyone. Does just a great book that's number 2 in a series make a great book 2, or does it come down to more? It's a great second book in the series because of the weight it pulls as a sequel. So there's a lot to consider there.
Yes. I thought Thomas phrased that question eloquently because I was grappling with that exact question when I was choosing my list.
Yeah. I think all books in a series should be great books within themselves, as well as complement the rest of the series. And so the answer is yes, it should do both.
It was interesting because when I was looking at my list, it was probably easiest to start with what are my favorite series and try and think of the book 2 in that. But I try to stay away from just picking book 2 of my favorite series, therefore this being a list of my top 5 favorite series with a book 2, and kind of think of a book 2 that either improved or something radically different that I enjoyed over the first one. And that's sort of where my list came from, not necessarily my favorite series.
I did start from my favorite series Goodreads shelf, which currently features 40 favorite series. But I listed all the second book candidates from there and then picked the ones that I thought either did something, like what you said, Chris. I agree with that. It either did something different, like made me enjoy the series more, or sort of cemented the series as a favorite. Or in some cases just were excellent books on their own. Like, I mean, all of these are really good books, I do think, but I think I did also think about how they're fulfilling their role as a second book in the series. So even though it wasn't strictly a favorite series, the ones I picked wouldn't be my top 5 favorite series, but they are good second books in a series, in my opinion. So, let's see.
Does a series have to be over for the second book to be great?
From my list, no.
Because I hope not, because a couple of mine aren't finished.
That's good.
I agree with that in principle. It doesn't have to be. I mean, I think a large part of the responsibility of a second book is to maintain your love for the first book, or if you were just meh about the first book, maybe make you like it more, right? So you don't need the series to be finished for that.
Like I can think of a couple of book series that, well, I mean, I haven't read. Something like Red Rising, where the book 2 is considered to be a noticeable upgrade in book 1, but that series' popularity, I think, seems to wane up and down, and even, right through to the end. So there were a lot of people that kind of stopped after 4 books anyway, enjoyed the series up at book 4, never read on, and it's like, right, these were high points in that series, and they've got their own view of what that series is and its length and the arc that it tells, so...
Yeah, this was an interesting list for me to choose from, because I actually haven't read that many modern series at all. I read, a bunch of, role-playing game related books way back in the 90s and 80s, and none of those make my list. They were fun when I read them, and they were a good time, and they're, lots of neat stuff that related to Dungeons and Dragons that I really loved about them. But I wouldn't, with my way my taste goes today, they're mostly forgettable. They're just, and I just, in all the other series that I read back then, they're very similar, because they were either Tolkien ripoffs or, Pulp Fiction type stories, and so they didn't really stick with me per se, until I got older and read some other series that had a bit more depth, and so a lot of my picks, except for one, are kind of recency bias. And then when I say recent, I mean within the last 25 years, because I'm old. But
that's really the last 6 months.
That's right.
Exactly.
Mine are also from the last 25 years.
Yeah, well, when you're only 29, Mahasha,
Nice. I wonder how much overlap we're going to have. That this will be interesting, given the amount of books that we read together. How many that will come out as
it's interesting the caveats we have, when it comes to making a list like this.
Yeah, really tough. I kept it to 5 because I knew it would take a while to discuss, and also it makes it harder to make the list if there's less.
Yes.
So
yeah.
With that said,
do we get honorable mentions?
Yes, exactly.
I have a bunch of those. Yeah.
God damn. Welcome to your 7-hour stream right now.
I gotta get more wine.
Yeah, we won't discuss our honorable, but just to just to mention them. So who wants to go first with their honorable mentions?
Oh.
I'm adjusting my list because I wasn't sure I would be allowed. So maybe someone else go first, and then I will. While I quickly scramble and add a few more.
Okay, I'll go first because I only picked 4 honorable mentions. One being the Two Towers. Two Towers, I think, is the best film in this the trilogy for me.
Really? Oh,
not a popular opinion, I know, but that's it. Yeah. But I for me, so Fellowship's the best book for me still. I love Fellowship, and Two Towers is a fabulous book, but given the caveat that I had earlier on, it sort of didn't make it. What came closer was Servant of the Empire by Johnny and Raymond Feist. Nice. I love the second book dearly. The first book is a great setup, but the second one really gets juicy and very nearly made my list. But all books are sort of level. Caliban's War.
I want to read
my honorable mentions from The Expanse. I mean, I don't think it's a great book, but it does introduce Christian Avasarala, and nearly for that reason, any book should be on a list, but it didn't quite make it. And the last honorable mention that I kind of put together is one that I'm reading at the moment that would almost certainly be on the list if I finished it, because I'm enjoying it so immensely, and that's Royal Assassin from Farseer Trilogy.
Nice.
So they're my honorable mentions.
Nice. Jared, do you have any honorable mentions?
Yeah, I do, actually, because all my honorable mentions, because I ordered my list, and all my honorable mentions were fighting for that number 5 spot,
Yeah.
So it was that was the hardest spot to choose. The top 4 I had, it was that number 5 spot that was really difficult to choose. And Two Towers is one of my honorable mentions as well.
Okay, good.
But also Ships of Merior was an honorable mention for me, just because it just completes. Her series is just so awesome. Everything's important there, but also some recency bias stuff. I got a few self-published stuff. Prophet of Edan, I thought was outstanding. Bold Ascension by Von Roycroft was a great step up from his first book, and really great. And I really loved Last of the Atlanteans by our friend P.L. Stewart.
Nice.
So I had those on there as honorable mentions, and they're really great. And also a book called Swords of the Horse Clans, and that's one from way back in the 80s. And that was the second book in the Horse Clan series, which I just love that series. And I don't remember much about it, but I just wanted to mention it because it's I love that series so much, and all the books for that series are just great. And that's more like the Pulp Fiction type stuff, and it's very cool. But anyways, those are all my honorable mentions. Yeah.
That's a cool list.
Varsha, you ready?
Yes, I am. I had Warrior Prophet from our recent read through of what is it called? The Prince of
Second
Nothing
Apocalypse.
series. Second Apocalypse, Prince of Nothing.
Yeah.
Fun fact, I forget what we're reading every time before we started recording. Warrior Prophet. It did some things. Like it was a book that made me very uncomfortable because of what some characters did, but how that was done and the progression of that character through the story, I thought was absolutely brilliant. I loved that book. And it was an excellent second book in the series. Well of Ascension from the Mistborn trilogy. It set up a mystery, and the resolution of that, absolutely brilliant. The only reason it wasn't on my top 5 was because I like the series that those books are in more than I like Mistborn as a series, but as a second book, man, does it hold its own. This one, Neom, I'm actually just in the middle of. I'm a little over 50% through, by Lavi Tidhar. That's how the audiobook narrator pronounced his name, and she sounds like she knows what she's doing, so that's how I'll say his name. And it's brilliant. It's brilliant. Like, Tidhar in general, I think what he does with his ideas, his books are just like chock full of ideas, very PKD in that. Okay. And PKD is a very solid influence. It just flows through. And I think I mentioned Martian Sands during our recent Martian time slip discussion as being a significant riff on Martian time slip. The Mars in Martian Sands is very similar to PKD's Mars in Martian Times. That he even reuses elements of it in that story. So he has these conversations with people who came before that are brilliant. And so what he's doing in Neom, I'm only halfway through the book, but it's already a favorite. Like, I love it. There's a character that I'm deeply attached to already. And the character happens to be a robot, by the way. So there's that.
My favorite type of people too.
Yes. And Ships of Merior, like Jared said, I think we talked earlier about the roles of second books, and this one certainly did cement my love for a series that I already had the feeling I would love very much, with Curse of the Mistwraith. And that's by Johnny Wirtz, by the way. Check out The Wars of Light and Shadow if you haven't yet. And then lastly, Chamber of Secrets, because I think that book, I think the first book was like, meh, when I read it back in school. It was okay. I loved it. I enjoyed it, whatnot. But Chamber of Secrets, again, cemented my love for it. And it did something that no other book before it did. It made me afraid. I remember reading at night, and then I had to go find my mommy because I got so scared. And so for that, and it's the second book of a series that I grew up on, so it had to sort of make at least an honorable mention in the list.
I was wondering if Harry Potter would make an appearance, and I thought if it was going to make an appearance, it was going to be in Vartus. So there we go.
Yes.
This was really tough, because I think Jared, you said that they were fighting for that 5th spot. I had the same problem.
Yeah.
Lots of back and forth, so it's tough too. But ultimately, had to decide. So the first one would have made the top 5 had it been a legitimate second book, because it's The Winter Road by Adrian Selby. These books are connected, but they're not sequels. So
Yes.
I couldn't really put on the list. If I could justify putting it on the list as a book 2, I would have. One of my favorite, I think maybe all-time books. Just he does so many great things. His fight scenes, his world building, it's very touching. It touches on life and love and loss and getting old and just so many things he touches on. It's a brilliant book. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend picking it up. You don't have to read the first book, or I think the first book is Snake. Or shit, I forget the first book. Anyway, go read it.
Snakewood or Snakewood or something.
I think Brother Red is the
It's the last
third
one.
one. Yeah, and then Snakewood I think may be the first one.
Okay,
but you can read them out of order. So the second one is Caliban's War. Chris, you mentioned, just because of Avasarala, that's enough for me. It builds on the first book, and it's very, very strong. Continues where the first book left off in terms of building and adding characters and lore. And The Expanse, we can talk about the end of the series, but there's so many themes that it explores very subtly. And you can read it as just a fun space opera, but if you sit and think about it like we did, there's so many themes and fun stuff to just dissect, and so many great things, so many great ideas that it explores. It's really, really great. The next one is The Last of the Atlanteans. Jared, you mentioned by P.L. Stewart.
Nice.
There's a combat scene at the end. I won't give too many details, but it is one of my favorite combat scenes, and I hate combat. So
outstanding.
Another book that really builds on the first book, and it excels it, which is hard to do. The last honorable mention I have was really, really tough, because these two, it was really fighting for the 5th spot, which is The Hand That Casts the Bone by Holly Tinsley, by H.L. Tinsley. It is a big step up from the first book, and I don't mean that as an insult. It's just you can feel the confidence, and you can feel it felt very. That's the best way I can describe it. Is it felt very confident from what it builds on from the first book, and it very, very strong, very, very great second book. So if you haven't started that series, it's the Wee Man of Ash and Shadow series. Go read that. Holly is just wonderful anyway, but her if you love very boots to the ground, gritty characters, very kind of gas lamp almost fantasy.
Yeah.
Go check that out. It's a great, great book.
Nice.
So is it time?
About the Ship Samario thing, I think that if Warhost of Vastmark was included in the novel, it would have made the top 5 for me, because I really love Warhost. And in the original hardcover of Ship Samario, they both were in the same book, and so I was like, it's actually a third book, so it's it's a tough choice.
Oh, and Ships is on my list too. Sorry, I missed that one. Yeah, Ships is on my list as an honorable mention too, just from what it does from the first. I think the second book is very hard to pull off, especially for a popular series, because there's so many expectations to. Do you continue what you did in the first book, or do you build on it, or do you change course? And then you piss everyone off. So there's a lot of. It's such a difficult position to be in, especially when the first book is so well received.
It has 2 very standout scenes in it. It has the car falling off the horse, which is totally amazing, and then it has the music scene. Let's say the Rebuttal and Jail as well, which I just think is one of the greatest things I've ever read in my entire life. There's just nothing quite like it. Yeah.
Yep. And the music scene later with Dakar and the girl, is that in this one or in the second Warhost? I forget.
They're so tied together. Those two books.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to separate.
But it's hard to.
Yeah.
But
Cool.
yeah, those two books together.
Time to start for number 5. Let the fights
Yes.
begin.
Let the fights begin. Who
I
wants to
didn't
go
rank
first?
my list, so these are in no particular order.
Blasphemy.
Yeah, that's nice.
Well, do you know what? Even if you haven't ranked it, people are going to hear it like a ranked list anyway, so the pressure's on.
Oh
Yeah.
man.
That's true. Because I'm starting with 5. I don't know what the rest.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm starting with
we'll start with
5.
5.
Yeah.
Okay.
So who wants
See
to go
how this
first?
is.
What order do you want to go in?
I feel like Farsha first because we'll put her under pressure.
Yes.
Okay.
And
Fine.
we have to
Five.
get payback when we can. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, excuse me. My book for this round is Queen of Attolia, which is the second book in the Queen's Thief series. So, the series as a whole, I love because it's incredibly features a very, very clever character, and the plot I think is very clever, and it just does things that I never expect in any of the books. They are 5 books in the series. They are sort of sequels, and they feature a central character that he's not the protagonist of every story, if that makes sense, but he's a big part of the background. And this second book, the first one was just introduced us to a bunch of people, and it had a clever thing that he did. The second one tells his story. From the third one onwards, it's other people in which he plays a background role, but this is his story, and I love it. It was very surprising with what it did, and it just made me love the series and the characters very, very much. So, King of Attolia for the Queen's Thief.
The Queen's. Who's that by?
Megan, sorry, I feel so bad for not remembering, but wait, the Queen's Thief, Megan Valen Turner. It's YA, and I think it won the Newbery Award, if I'm not mistaken, which is awarded to YA books, right? Some books in the series won that award or were nominated for it or something, but it's a very good series. I loved it very much.
Excellent. Strong start, especially, starting off strong with a book that I've never heard of at all.
Yeah.
This is exactly what a recommendations kind of thing should be about.
Yeah. No,
Nice.
that's I totally expected to come in here hearing all the same stuff that you've always heard about, but that's
Interesting.
That's neat.
I'm pretty sure at least 4 of my books are on nobody else's list. So
Interesting.
Chris, you want to start off with your 5th?
See that sassy move? What? Right, how do you beat that? Right, okay. So I'll start with a bit of a story. So the very, very start of my fantasy journey was very much we had like a mobile library, a truck that used to drive around the streets, and then used to come back every 2 weeks, and a lot of them just looked like incredibly boring books. And fantasy books had the best covers, right? I think that's kind of true for a lot of us. So I went along and I picked a book off the shelf after a while. I read it, loved it, and then you find out that it's book 3 in a series. You just didn't know that it was book 3 in a series, but it was book 3 in a series, and there was another 2. So I went back and read the other 2. There were the next 2 I picked up. So the series is the sort of Shannara trilogy, which I've got an enormous bind up here.
Wow.
So Elfstones is number 2.
Book.
That is
Nice.
I have the second trilogy in a similar bind up. I thought they were great ideas at the time, because you would save space, but they're totally unreadable. This is just only going to be used as a murder weapon in the future. It's only use going forward. But sort of Shannara, the first book, is very much a Lord of the Rings retelling. It's a Fellowship of the Ring retelling. It's very questy. It's got Gandalf following on, same character going along. And Elfstones at least tried to veer away something different. I love Sword a lot. It has atmosphere pouring out of it, but Elfstones tells the story of these Elfstones passed down to his grandson or granddaughter, one of those anyway, and they are questing to basically heal the land, and it's very classic fantasy insofar as they go from place to place, new encounters, danger, forests, druids, all of that kind of stuff going on, but it at least kind of broke the mold a little of this is just basically Fellowship of the Ring retelling in some ways, and kind of cemented my love for fantasy at that time, because it was like, oh god, every time they walk in the dark forest, I was just like, oh yeah, here we go, save that one for reading at night. And things moving about in the woods, you knew what you were going in and even getting in those early stages, but it was something you just really couldn't get enough of. And they had the dangerous stranger that could turn it any way, any moment, to be either good or bad, all that stuff's fun. So yeah.
Did that one introduce the Swordmaster guy? The Elfstones? You know who I'm talking about, right?
I'm trying to remember his name.
I can't remember his name either, but
I have a name in my head, but it's probably completely wrong.
I mean, I read that.
Get that something.
I read that 30 years ago. So
yeah, I was kind of the same thing. I'm like, yeah, there's a name there, but I'm not gonna go for it. Like, because
he was a really cool character. I just remember that, and that was one of those series I was talking about that I forgot about. So I couldn't tell you whether the second book's good or not because I totally forgot.
Witch Song's great as well, and I love the next series as well. It's I like that series. I'm gonna do a reread of that series someday, even though there's like 150 books in it now. It feels like. Interesting enough, I should point out, it's also on. I didn't know this at the time when I made my list. It's also on Alex's list as well. So he has the Elfstones on his as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my number 5 pick is A Clash of Kings by Mr. George Martin. Yeah. I read this way back in 2000, so not too far after it came out. And what I loved about this second book was because you had that shock in the first book, that everybody knows about now, but you already saw Martin's willingness to do things that other fantasy wasn't willing to do, and killing off major characters and what have you. But for all that, the first book was still new and still didn't have the level of magic that we're used to from fantasy. And then the second book, I was like, okay, here we go. Because I was a little trepidation going into it. And then I read it and I was like, all right, we're getting some magic now. We're getting, this witch summoning a shadow demon to kill off a king, a wannabe king. And it was just like, okay, here we go. We got dragons being born, we get some really cool magic stuff going on that I wanted out of my fantasy. And so this second book cemented for me a love for the series because of that. And I was like, yeah, this isn't just a historical retelling of the War of the Roses anymore. It's actually a big fantasy world. We got introduced to more of the world of Martin's world in this book, with the whole Pentos and all the other kingdoms being involved in the war for the 5 kings and all that stuff. And I think he really upped his game in this second book, and this second book is the Martin that we know today, other than the fact that he finished it. But it's a great book, and that was it was up between that and Jenny Wirtz, and I had to pick that one because I really I remember really just loving that book when it came out, because I was so relieved that it was so far beyond the first book, and the first book was great, but it wasn't the fantasy I wanted at the time, and the second book just gave me that, and I was like, yes.
Nice. Good pick.
We're coming out of the gate swinging.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Yeah, good stuff.
Cheers.
Yes. So before I start, I'll go ahead and read off everyone who posted on the thread on the forum their fifth book, or at least the book on the top of the list, because some of them are in no particular order. So Drew, the first book he listed was Wall of Storms by Ken Liu, which is the book 2 of the Dandelion Dynasty. That may or may not show up again later. We'll have to wait and see. The first book on Thomas J. Devons's list is Dead House Gates. That may or may not show up later. I'm sure there's a wild guess. It may show up later. And our friend Alex listed The Two Towers by J.R.R. Tolkien, Helm's Deep, The Return of Gandalf, Treebeard. I can go on and on and on.
Cool.
So,
What's this Dead House case? I never heard of that one.
Yeah, what is that book?
I may have heard of it.
It's going to be
at
on
one point.
3 or 5.
Coming to a read along near you.
Yes.
Yes. For anyone listening, we are starting our Malazan read along, and I know a lot of people fall off of series. They'll start and they'll kind of puss out, but we're not going to do that because Varsha's in charge and she's not allowed. So
I got methods.
yes. So we won't be doing that. So if you'd like to join the read along, we are starting beginning of September.
Beginning of October.
October. I got you.
Yes.
Okay. So come and check it out. So my number 5, which is really tough. I mean, there's lots of great books out there. My number 5, and I put this on the list because of my level of enjoyment of reading this book in this series, which is The Wrathbringer. It's book 2 of the Hellborn King series by Christopher G. Brenning.
Really? Awesome.
It builds a lot. This doesn't sound like an insult, but it there's a lot of improvements from the first book, and I love the first book. The first book is great. It reads very cinematic. It reads like a movie. And the second book, in fact, some of the things that Chris and I actually talked about not being. Yeah, there you go. Chris has a copy of it. The first book, some of the things that we kind of felt like could have been a little, tweaked. Christopher actually went back and listened to the feedback and made some improvements. And I think the second book builds on the lore and on the characters and what he built in the first book and just makes it better, just makes everything better. And it's just fun. It's just like a fun read. It's violent. There's a great combat scene in it. Mm-hmm. There's lots of lore and character work and world building and so many things that go into it. And it's just fun. It's just like a fun story to read. It reads really easily. It reads like you're watching a movie. And I don't know how he writes the way he does because he's not a big reader, but it flows. It's just a fun fantasy story. I'm waiting for the next book because I'm going to go back and reread the first 2 and the novella. And the prologues, I'm gonna say something that a lot of people will disagree with, but Christopher writes the best prologues because they are fantastic.
Yeah,
great prologues.
Nice.
So that's my number 5.
I got those on my Kindle too. Yeah.
I may as well say it's number 4 on mine. That's the reason that I'm holding it coming up. So it's actually number 4 on my list as well. I completely agree with all that you said. But I was kind of going through, I was thinking, and then as soon as I remembered, God, that's the series. It's only 2 books long so far, with 2 and a novella. And just the characters in 2, like we get more of Titus in the second one. We get more the Madeline story towards the end is just, I love how mad it is. And then we have an absolutely insane character as well, who is just so good. That series to date is just one of the, like you say, one of the most fun things to read in terms of like taking a familiar kind of gritty fantasy world and just kind of having all of these things play. And just so much to like about that series. Yep. Big fan.
There's just something about it that it's just special. It's just something about it that it feels special. I don't know if that makes any sense.
I completely agree.
Yeah. Cool. So that's my number 5. It's really tough. Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Nice.
So Varsha, you want to? Oh, go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
Oh.
I was going to say I've messed up the order already just by jumping in there. There you go.
Anything else you want to add on to your number 4?
No, not at all. I think you said it all very well there, and insofar as it is something when I thought of all of the options that I had, I was like, well, it definitely makes it because it's compulsive and it's also memorable. Sometimes you read things that are compulsive and page turny, and as soon as you finish them, you're like, oh, well, I remember nothing of that book. Dan Brown's books would have been very much of that ilk. You couldn't stop reading them kind of thing. Whereas this is very page-turning and very compulsive, but everything feels memorable. And I think that's a very hard skill to pull off.
Mm. Copy and paste, Chris. There we go.
Am I going next? I forget, did you restrict to fantasy series? No, right?
No.
Because I have some sci-fi.
I have some other stuff, so.
Okay. The next book on my list is Judas Unchained, which is the second book in Peter K. Hamilton. I forget what the middle initial is, but Peter Hamilton's Commonwealth Saga. It's a duology. The first book is Pandora's Star, and the second book is Judas Unchained. I think this may be one of the first sci-fi books I read. Not the first, but one of the first sci-fi series that I read. And this one had an excellent resolution of a mystery that was set up in the first book. I actually forget whether the reveal happens in the first book and we solve the problem of like how to deal with them in the second book, or if the reveal happens in the second book. But regardless, I think and I had the same reason as you guys mentioned for your books. I had a lot of fun with this. The progression with which I sped up my reading pace of the series, because I started very, very slow. I read maybe like 15 pages in 3 days or something like that, to staying up all night to finishing the book because I just needed to know. This did a fantastic job. And yeah, I can't say more without spoiling, obviously, but it is an excellent second book in that duology.
Nice.
Cool. I see. I was actually at a used bookstore yesterday, and I see a whole bunch of Peter Hamilton there, and I'm like, I wonder if I should get those.
Yes, they're on the wheel, by the way, for speculative speculations.
Of course they are.
Peter Hamilton is on the list. We've got the White Trilogy, which I don't remember what the second book was like because it's all meshed together into one story for me. But yeah, this one, because I know that the most of the mysteries resolved in the second book, went on the list.
Nice.
Look forward to getting to that. Sure.
Yes.
Jared?
Well, you can probably call me the Lord of Redundancy from this point on, but my my number 4 is from the First Chronicles of Thomas Covenant. It is The Ill Earth War by Stephen R. Donaldson, and I love the second book because it brings you, because the first book was a subversion of the the quest fantasy, Lord of the Rings basically type of fantasy. It was a subversion of that. It was a portal fantasy as well, where the main character doesn't believe what's happening to him. The second book, he maintains that unbelief. That he's called the Unbeliever for a reason. But it also brought you back into that world, the land, and it made you realize that there's something else going on here. There's something bigger going on here, and it brought to you all these feelings about that you don't like the main character, you don't like Thomas Covenant, but there's a reason behind why you don't like him, and there's a reason behind why he hates himself so much, and there's a reason behind everything that he's going through in the land in this second book. And I love the very last line of the book here. It doesn't give anything away. It's a great line though. And so don't worry, I'm not spoiling anything by this, but it says, grimly, deliberately, he left his forehead uncleaned, untouched. He did not choose to repudiate the accusation written there. And I thought that is just such a powerful line once you understand what he's been going through so far, and it leads to things that he has to deal with in the third book as well. And it's just and it also solidified Donaldson's ability to write was unsurpassed at the time that this came out. I've read other authors who can definitely match him now, but like Wirtz and Erickson and stuff. But at the time, there was nothing like his writing. There was nothing like it as far as just the words he used. And some people don't like it. Some people don't like having to look up words that authors use if they don't know what they mean. I love that because it expands my knowledge, and I get to use it, expands my vocabulary and expands my understanding of things, and so I love it. And I don't like it when an authors purposely hold back. I don't think they should. And we all know Janie Wirtz doesn't hold back, and and I love that. And that also solidified that second book as like, I'm going to read whatever this guy puts out just because of that.
Excellent.
So this one time, the last line of a book, when I read it before I was supposed to, it's not my fault.
Yes. Yeah. I give you an out in this one.
That's Varsha's thing. So before I do mine, let's go back to the list. So Drew has Armor of the Sphinx by Josiah Bancroft, which is book 2 of the Books of Babel. That's his number 4. Thomas has October's Baby by Glenn Cook, which I'm not familiar with, but I'm sure it's wonderful. And our friend Alex has The King of the Murgos by Davis Eddings. The Maluran introduced one of my favorite characters from that world, Urgit, the unlikely king of the warlike Murgos.
David
Nice.
Evans, yeah.
Steven Erickson once said, like in one of his interviews, he said that his writing style that he chose for Malazan was a blend of Donaldson and Glenn Cook's styles.
Yeah.
And they're both significant influences on his work, as far as I know. So it's pretty cool that they've both come up in the list.
Yeah, and I know Wirtz is influenced by Donaldson as well, because she told me that. So,
Nice.
Yeah, so number 4 on my list, speaking of Erickson, is Deadhouse Gates, book 2 of Malazan. I haven't finished the series. I've gotten to book 5, but Deadhouse Gates. So Guardians of the Moon has a reputation for being confusing, lots of POVs and everything else. And Jared's holding up his copy. Deadhouse Gates is a big change for me anyway. It was a big change from the first book because it read a lot differently, and it's you're gonna hear me say that things are violent a lot on my list, but it is very dark. It's the book that I thought this has to be considered dark fantasy. I won't say the G word, but it has to be considered dark fantasy just because of the themes it explores and things that happen. The characters get tortured, and so yeah, it was just, it's what hooked me on the series. I think a lot of people read the first book and they get confused and they go to Deadhouse Gates, and that's the kind of the hook of the series. So I suspect we'll hear more about Deadhouse Gates here in a little bit. Just a wild guess, but yeah, heads are being scratched.
I wonder.
Not from me.
Don't know what you're talking about.
So, Chris, you want to go with your number 3?
Number 3. Okay, my number 3 was an honourable mention from Varsha. It is Well of Ascension, Mistborn Book 2, by Brandon Sanderson. I like Mistborn quite a bit, but mostly for Book 2. And it's sort of an unlikely hero insofar as it's pretty much a romance book at the heart of it. It very much centres on a romance at the heart of it. And normally that would be a bit like, oh God, especially because it's sort of like a youngish romance and it's kind of a bit twee and a bit whatever, but it kind of gives the book a centre to kind of revolve around, because all of the other character work that happens around it, all these really interesting characters that you root for wholeheartedly as they grow and they kind of experience the world and kind of take on more responsibility around them, it all shifts around that, and you kind of, it's almost like this band of brothers / sisters the whole way along as they kind of fight against this world kind of falling apart on them. And all of the while there's this little whisper that goes in the background that you don't really know what it means. You don't really know what it's all about, but you're damned to find out. And then in typical Sanderson style, he brings it all together at the end and drops a bomb on top of you and makes it sort of all worth it. And I think of all of the books of the Mistborn series, it's the one that works the best in that regard. Plus you have like the slightly evil characters and all of that kind of stuff going on in the background, really trying to work out what's going on. And as you said earlier about Ratbringer, this is another one that just feels like a lot of fun. It feels like an awful lot of playing in a world. People talk about the magic system that he set up. Yes, but that's like the bed that then Book 2 then sits on. You kind of know what things are going along there. You know how it works. And it just lets the characters play in that world. And I think for me, it's by far and away the most successful of the Mistborn novels.
Cool.
That's saying something.
Yeah.
I like it.
Have you read any of the Stormlight Archive, Chris?
No, I haven't.
No. I was going to ask how that compares to your...
No, I have this friend that hasn't suggested it as a reading plan, and therefore I haven't been able to fit it in.
She's not going to, though.
As soon as it comes up on like a reading schedule that I could join and fit a book in, maybe.
Good.
Giving her ideas, are you?
Oh, no.
The second Stormlight Archive book, though, is on Drew's list, I think. And I know it's a lot of people's, like everybody loves Words of Radiance from what I've seen on BookTube. So.
Yeah.
Well, Varsha, want to have your number 3?
Number 3 is The Subtle Knife by Philip Pullman. It's the second book of his Dark Materials.
Yeah.
And yeah, this did the other thing, right? It didn't cement my love for a series. It made me like a series I was feeling very meh about. The first
That's
book
good.
is The Golden Compass, which is... It was interesting, but I didn't really care for... Is her name Lyra? As the main character. It was cute and everything, but I didn't find too much to get attached to there. She was just a naughty child as far as I was concerned. But the second book explained, like, it got into some metaphysics and it explained some stuff in a way that I absolutely did not expect. It blew my mind. And it introduces another character with whom she develops an excellent friendship / relationship with, and that has a brilliant conclusion in the third book. I didn't care for other parts of the third book, but anyway, this was my favorite book of the 3 in that series, and it did some things with world building that I don't think I've seen anyone else do. Like, not in a way that he's the best person at it, just I've not seen anything else like it in what I've read. So yeah, The Subtle Knife by Philip Pullman.
Excellent.
Cool.
Series
did you like the show?
Sorry, what was that, Jared?
Did you like the show?
I've seen... Yeah, I enjoyed as much of it as I have seen. I think I'm yet to watch the last season. But
I did
did get
pretty
to...
good.
Yeah, I enjoyed it quite a bit. So I've not been watching shows that are longer than 30-minute episodes a lot lately because I just don't have the time. But
I wonder why.
I wonder why. But
World domination takes time, eh?
yes, it does. When I do plan to go back to it.
Yeah. I think the TV show is a hell of a lot better than the film. You know, the Golden Compass film that was made.
Yes,
it's very
absolutely.
much more creates this world that's much more believable. Even though it's a fantasy world, sort of important.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I liked it. I mean, I never read the book, so I can't compare. But I thought the show was very well done. I thought it was really cool.
And I really liked Lyra in the show, I think. In the book, it's not that I disliked her, I wasn't interested in her story very much. It took me until book 2 to become interested. But with the show, I got attached right away. So
And Subtle Knife's a great name for a book, isn't it?
yeah, the subtle knife. Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Yeah.
And what the knife does, oh my god.
it's subtle,
alongside
isn't it?
everything else. Yes, it is. It is quite subtle. Have you seen the show, Steve?
I haven't.
It's a good one.
Yeah,
Look
it is
good.
a good one.
It is good. Yeah.
But I have all this time to read that I have to keep up with some demanding friends I have, so I can't watch it.
Well,
I
unlike
don't know what you mean. Yes, go ahead, Jack.
unlike True Detective, it has polar bears. All right.
Yes,
Yes, it does. And like Lost, it has polar bears.
Yeah. Oh, we got the full spectrum there, didn't we? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
We should really do a Lost watch along.
We really should.
Yes.
We should. Yes.
We really should.
Oh no.
I'd like that.
Yeah,
You don't like the show, Jared?
we'll just title it "Prepare to be Disappointed All Over Again." You know, it's
Over again. Yeah. My disappointment was high.
the page chewing watch along. Yeah.
Am I going to have to defend the last season or the last episode?
Yeah, you
Oh,
will.
I'll be with you there.
To be honest, it's the last episode is not the problem. It's
Actually, yes.
they did as much
There
as they
are
could
other-
with it. It's the shit before that.
Last
that's
three
what I-
seasons, yeah.
Yeah. When you knew it was sort of getting aimless. Anyway, we'll save that for a watch along and then be totally, surprised when we love all of it.
Yeah. It's not as bad as I remember. It's actually pretty good. It kinda
Maybe
makes
we'll
sense.
all dislike different things that someone else will defend, and then the sum of it will be that we actually quite love it.
Maybe.
Yes, we love Matthew Fox t-shirts. Yeah, nice.
So, Jared, you want to bring
Yeah,
up
number three. I was going to share a screen because I don't have a copy of the book so you guys can see, but I don't know if you can see that or not.
It's great for audio.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yes.
So my number 3 is The War Within by Stephen R. Dawson. It's the second book in the Great Gods War trilogy. This is maybe a recency bias pick. This is his latest trilogy that he came out with, and what Donaldson does so well with this book is he expands the world into a fully realized world. In some of his series, in the first book, he has a very limited character view, a very limited view of the world. It's like a just a little microscope onto a certain little section of the world and a certain person usually, and then that person his worldview and yours is completely blown out of the water and expanded in the second book, and that's what he does so beautifully with The War Within. As you get this sudden big picture of what's going on, and all your perceptions and expectations are completely turned around of what to expect from the series. And he did it so well in this book. And then and then he even finished it off stronger in the third book. But this second book, it really just it reaffirmed, because it was more recent, it reaffirmed my love for Donaldson's writing, and it reaffirmed what he can do with a series when everybody else seems to have long series. Not everybody else, but some of the big names that have long series like Erickson and Sanderson and stuff like that they continually write within that world. Donaldson just seems to be able to make something completely new and have you fall in love with it, and that's kind of what this series was. And I love this second book, just like I love the first and third one too. But
You're killing me, Jared.
yeah,
This Donaldson talk.
Yeah. Oh, it's not over. Next,
But put them on the wheel.
Yes.
I'll put them on the wheel.
yes.
Yes. So I'll go from the list from Drew. His number 3 is Royal Assassin by Robin Hobb. It's, of course, the Farseer trilogy. Thomas, or friend Thomas J. Devins, The Merest Truth by Michael R. Fletcher, which is one that very, very close to making my list. It is the Beyond Redemption, I think, is I'll say the G word. It's a grimdark staple. I think Merest Truth expands on that. It's more plot driven, which could be good or bad depending on your preferences, but it does build on it, and it does set up the third book. So, and there's a great battle scene at the end that is just it warps your mind a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good book. It did build on the world quite a bit. And the world is very enjoyable. Steve, Dan, and I really enjoyed twisting our brains into knots, trying to figure out how things work. So that was a good series.
Yeah, it is. It's probably my favorite world. It's probably my favorite world to read about, just because it's so bonkers.
Yeah, it really is.
And our friend Alex has The Black Unicorn by Terry Brooks, Landover Just Class, he mentions.
I was checking this out. I didn't think Black Unicorn was Landover. I could be wrong with that. I don't know. I beg to differ on what Alex is saying, but I thought the second book was different. Maybe I'm wrong. There's 2 sets of Landover books. That's what it is. Landover books are great. I really really enjoy them. They are. Best way to describe them: set in the modern day, and a guy is a bit bored with life, and he purchases a life in a fantasy world, basically, and a bit like a portal fantasy. And it's fun. I think he's a doctor, isn't he? Yeah, they're great. Magic Kingdom for Sale and Soul is the first one.
That's such a wonderful name for a book. I've been meaning to read that. Magic Kingdom for Sale, sold.
It's great. It's a lot of fun. Yes, it is. Black Unicorn, of course, is Landover book too. What I know.
So my number 3 is actually a horror book. It is I know. Shocking. It is a lullaby. It's book 2 of the Nightmareland Chronicles by Daniel Barnett. Mm-hmm. So the whole series is set up to be, in the first book, Nightfall, this whole series is set up as, what if the sun just disappears? The sun vanishes. What happens?
Interesting.
Yeah, that's kind of the setup. So the first book is very confusing because everyone is, what happened? The sun's gone. The second book, so the first book is a little bit disorienting, but I think it's intentional to be disorienting because what would happen if the sun disappeared? The second book, there's some great scenes in the second book that creeps me out, and it takes a lot to creep me out. There's some really wonderful. There's some great horror. And I want to say subtle horror, but it just because of the way the world is set up, and there's some dangers out there, and there's some. You think in some dark corners, what would happen if the sun vanishes? Like the little things that happen in dark corners and the dangers that exist there when the sun is out in the sky. The sun's gone. What happens there? There's a funny story. For my job, I have to go and take a physical every so often, and we had to kind of do check your blood pressure and all that stuff. There's one time when I was reading this book in the waiting room because it takes forever to get back there. When I went back there, they were taking my blood pressure. My blood pressure was high. I was just reading this book, and they said, "Are you upset for some reason? Does something happen to you today that you're upset because your blood pressure is really high?" And I was just reading the Night Line Chronicles by Daniel Barnett in the waiting room. It's probably what it is. So I waited a little bit longer, and I was fine. But that's kind of the reaction that it got out of me. So it'll always stick with me as it was able to affect me in that way because it was so effective in what it was trying to do. So. Yeah,
I think I remember that story from your talking about it on a weekly update or something.
Yeah.
Once.
Yeah. So it'll always stick with me. And Daniel Barnett is one of those writers who he's just brilliant. I think this series needs to be adapted. There's certain people that write that are just special. We've talked about, and he's just special. There's something about him that he's just very, very gifted, and I hope he can find. Someone to adapt his series eventually.
Excellent. Okay, so
yeah.
If I want to feel it physical, I know what to do.
Yeah. It would be good if I failed, but
no.
But things are getting serious. Number 2.
Number 2. Is it on me? Okay.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so this one breaks with the convention of book 2's being better than book 1 because this follows one of the greatest book 1s of all time. I think if we did the best book 1s of all time, this might be number 1, but it does something very different, and it's a book we all know very well. It's Authority from Southern Reach.
Oh,
nice. That almost made my list.
So Annihilation is just phenomenal book 1, but Authority does something quite differently. I think it sort of grounds it a bit more on, well, what you think is reality. But mostly it's a book about just asking what the fuck is going on. Page after page after page after page, but following the central character that you are not sure if you like, you believe, if even he believes himself. It's all a bit twisty-turny, and I love Authority. Authority actually is probably my favourite book in the series, even though Annihilation is probably, I would say, the best book in the series, but best/favourite. It can often be different.
So it's interesting that you mentioned that because I agree. I think there's books that you can say are the best, and then there's books you can say are my favorite. Yeah. Because it just works in certain ways.
Sure.
So I think it's an important distinction to make because I think some people get wrapped up in this book this whatever it is better, but I enjoy this more. So it's okay to get it. It's your list. It's okay.
1984 is one of the best books ever written, and I hate it.
Yeah. That's another thing entirely, though, Jared. Best/favorite to be in. This is the best book that's ever been written, and I hate it. Yeah.
Okay.
I love that quote. That's so good.
It's really good. I think it's good stuff, and it's a great trilogy. I know for those of you who are curious about what we think about that trilogy, go listen to Speculative Speculations and hear all about it. Don't want to spoil anything for anyone. But it's definitely one that you'll want to talk about after.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. It's a conversation starter for sure.
Definitely. So I'm really glad I was able to read it with all of you because it would have driven me crazy not to have someone to talk to reading that.
I was very pleased to read that with you guys because I wouldn't have picked it up on my own, and that was of course Vasha bullied me into it, and I had to thank her for that.
Yeah, kind of had to. What else can I say?
It's a book that begs to be talked about in short chunks. You read a little bit and you go, okay, I need to, 1, say what I think, but 2, ask other people what they think because I'm really not sure I know what's going on at all. Yeah.
So, quick question, because I know we had different opinions on the third book, right?
Yes.
We're not really different, but I think we all kind of had. Will the enjoyment of a third book dampen your enjoyment of the second book?
I tried to not let it do that. Because I like to judge books on their own, even if they're in a series. I try to look at a book and say, did this book do what it was supposed to do, and was it enjoyable on its own merits? And so I try not to let it. I mean, of course, we're all human, so we're going to let biases in here and there. But yeah, so that's my take on it.
Conversely, I think the enjoyment of book 1 and 2 carried my enjoyment of book 3 to a certain extent. I love 1 and 2 so much that I forgive maybe some of the apparent sins of book 3 in some way. Maybe rightly or wrongly, I don't know. It's it's one of those things, because there's 3 books in a series and they all very distinct. It's very hard not to be swayed by your feelings of the entire series or individual books and liking the whole thing, because I think for us it's probably a bit different insofar as we just didn't read them in isolation, we read them together. So there is that perception of, like, I enjoyed each book, I enjoyed the reading of each book, but it was also a community thing for us, so it kind of elevates it that little bit as well, probably.
True.
I think it also depends on what the third book does, right? Is not talking about the series specifically, but to address what Steve said in general. I think if it reframes some things I had from the second book, then yes, it might change how I feel about previous books. But it's pretty unlikely usually. But yeah, series, I think when they're written as one overarching story, it makes sense. Like if the ending of the book dampens what you felt about the middle because it made you rethink some of the things you had there, I think the third book of a trilogy might stand to do that as well. But since they are entire books, maybe they get judged differently. I don't know. But again, depends on the book.
So, Frasha, you have your number 2 ready?
Yes, Wandering Fire by Guy Gabriel Kay, which is the second book of the Fiona Tapestry.
Nice.
So this trilogy, famously, I think, features an Arthurian legend, not quite retelling, let's say, snippets from the legend in this trilogy. And it does a fantastic job with it. The first book doesn't have a whole lot of the Arthurian part of the legend, but the second book onwards, it builds on it. And that part, it broke my heart. But it tugged at all the heartstrings. I'm not giving away that it had a bad ending. Like, it just, like, the repeated sadness of it, I think, was really beautiful in the second book. And some characters did some things that were entirely surprising. There was a lot of very interesting character development in this second book. And as any good second book would do, it cemented an already deep love I had for the series with the first book. So, yeah, Wandering Fire by Guy Gabriel Kay.
Nice.
Yeah. Can't wait to get into more K.
Yes.
I'm excited.
Jared, what do you got?
All right, number 2 is The Gap into Vision, Forbidden Knowledge by Stephen R. Donaldson. Jeez. How'd you guys guess it was going to be Stephen Donaldson?
Can't believe it.
No idea, Josh. Nope.
This is his space opera, his 5-book series. And this, when I originally read it, completely blew me away because I read the first book and I almost didn't like it. The first book's called The Real Story, and it was so focused on one character in a ship and you didn't see anything else. And it was brutal and it was hard to deal with what was happening to this character. And I was like, wow, do I really want to go into the second book with this story? And then I read the second book and I was blown away. Once again, he expanded the universe in the second book. He gave you a vision of what was going on in the bigger picture out of nowhere and totally spun your head around 3 times with the implications of what happened in that first book. The first book's called The Real Story, and it's anything but. And so it's in this book, Forbidden Knowledge, it really is forbidden knowledge. You shouldn't know it, and it gives you it just really just blows up everything. And it's kind of like what I was saying with The War Within with my number 3, but with this space opera, I wasn't a big science fiction reader, but because Donaldson's name was on it, I was like, okay, I'm going to read science fiction. And it's more space opera, so space opera is kind of more, has that fantasy feel as far as how the story structure goes, rather than just being about an idea like a lot of science fiction that we read on the Sci-Fi Masterworks thing. So it was meant to be a full series, and it was meant to have that structure of fantasy. And so this second book, Donaldson does this like nobody else. He a lot of fantasy books have a lot of exposition in that first book to explain the world to you so that you are familiar with the world and that you can get into it. You can say, okay, this is a world that I want to explore, and this is a world that I want to be involved in, and I want to know about this world so that I know what's going on with the characters and where they're going and what have you. Donaldson doesn't do that. He gives you this little tiny microcosm of character development, and it's intense character development, and then he blows your mind with the implications of that character development in the second book. And it's just this book cemented for me Donaldson as my favorite writer at the time, going forward. And I've read everything he put out since, and
interesting.
I love this book. I can't wait till Steve puts this on the wheel so it will fall on The Real Story and we can get into the series.
Oh, it's on the way for speculative speculations.
Yes.
I'm actually rooting for it.
Yeah, Steve's powers don't exist to the speculative speculations.
Yes,
Well, that's because he wasn't there last time. Now, if he's
I
there
didn't
and he's
I didn't know the wheel was being turned.
We're going to have to redo it. That's good. Steve is being hosed. He never gets to read what he wants to read.
Plotting against me.
I have an odd feeling that like I said, it's brutal. The first book is brutal, and this book doesn't stop. And I have a feeling from what I've heard about Baker and the Second Apocalypse that it's that same kind of brutality. Just from what I've heard about that series, I haven't read the Second Apocalypse, but and so I think Steve is going to be up your alley. And but on the other hand, it's not nihilistic. The series ends like where you're cheering. You're like, wow. The fifth book is one of the best books I've ever read, and it made you feel unbelievable. And so, kind of like the Cripple God just did this past week for me. So, I can't recommend the series enough. Once you get past, if you can get past that first book and how brutal it is, I can't recommend it.
But it's only number 2. Just saying.
This book is number 2. Yes.
I think I know maybe you're number 1.
Yeah, grandstand finish.
What? Am I not surprising? Am I that predictable?
The famous 5 go to the lighthouse. It's coming.
I am. Carry on.
So we will go to the list. Drew, his number 4 was Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson, Stormlight Archive.
Number 2,
reading off of words. Thomas has The Hand That Casts the Bone by H.L. Tinsley. And he has a lot of other, and he has honorable mentions. So I'll go ahead and throw in his honorable mentions really quickly. Rise of Empire by Michael J. Sullivan. The Heroes by Joe Abercrombie, and Clash of Iron by Angus Watson. Nice. His honorable mentions. And our friend Alex, his number 2 was The Elfstones of Shannara by Terry Brooks, the Swords of Shannara trilogy. Darker than the first book, a true fantasy legend settling into his stride and hitting all the right notes. Classic characters like Stan Jans and Itria, and villains like the Changeling and the Reaper.
He remembers more than I do. There you go.
Yeah. So my number 2 is one that Drew had on his list, which is The Wall of Storms by Ken Liu. This is book 2 of the Dandelion Dynasty. The first book in the Dandelion Dynasty reads a lot like a history book, and I don't mean that in a negative way. It's a different type of read. Wall of Storms, it really expands on that, and it makes the first book make sense, if that makes sense. The things that happen in the first book pay off in the second book, and all the things that are set up in the first book, you start to see the breadcrumbs that were laid and why it was done that way. There's some wonderful characters, and one of my favorite, and I'll try not to give too much away. One of the favorite things for me that happens is when different cultures meet each other for the first time, and they look at each other like, oh, they're barbarians, and oh, they're barbarians, and they both, everyone doesn't know how to react. No one knows what to do. This happens so many times in history anyway, but it's just done so wonderfully. There's so many great, wonderful characters. It's masterfully done. Ken Liu is, if you've never heard him speak, go listen to one of his interviews. We've been lucky enough to speak to him a couple of times, but he's brilliant, and his books are brilliant. So if you haven't read the Dandelion Dynasty, go check it out. It is wonderful.
On the list.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is on the list. Yeah.
And I'm down for a reread if anyone wants to do it. So not anytime soon. Don't give Varsh any ideas.
No, it's also on the wheel for speculative speculations.
Oh, nice.
Oh, nice.
I like that one.
Cool.
So it is time. Chris, number 1.
Me. Only one choice for the top best second book of all time. It's obviously Children of Ruin. Not really. Oh, the faces. If this was on video, I swear.
Oh, man.
Gotcha.
I think Steve would have ended the podcast right there. Boom.
Oh God!
I was looking forward to hearing your explanation for it. This would be good.
You're not getting one. Let's actually go for what I think is the best book 2 of all time. And it's another one of those series that's probably on the wheel. But this is such an enormous step up from what is a very good first book. It is Heart and Dark from the Sun Eater.
Oh, nice.
Heart and Dark is astonishingly good. It is another, looks like a chunky book. It is a long book. It doesn't read very slowly at all because there's so much stuff that happens in this book and stuff goes down that it's kind of amazing. It's one of those books, I think I've said this before, that I can't see people not liking. They might like some of the choices that are made in it, that's very different, but I think as a book you read it and you kind of go, this is what it is. Sun Eater to me so far is reminds me a bit of The Expanse insofar as that every book sort of takes on slightly different themes. The way The Expanse would do noir and a western and that kind of stuff. This kind of does the same, and book 2 goes more in the sci-fi direction. The first book is very much more fantasy sci-fi. There's like a kind of element of that, and this one is very much more into cybernetics and consciousness and all of that kind of stuff. And oh my god, it's so much fun. There's so much good stuff happens in this story, and it's, to me, when I thought of the list of top book twos in the series, this was easy. This one kind of jumped to the top for me, and yeah. Any series that starts with the premise, my name is Adrian Marlowe, and I'm responsible for genocide, essentially, and this is my story, is a tough character to sort of get behind all the time, because you can see what's going, but you can't help but root for him and stuff. So yeah, the continuing saga of Adrian Marlowe, it's fabulous.
Nice. I'm looking forward to that series.
On the wheel. And even better than Children of Lorraine. There you go.
Why'd you say that to begin with?
I thought you were going to say light fantastic. that would have been my gag.
Yeah.
Well, so it brought up my list, so I didn't realize it was that much of a favorite for you.
Yeah, it's so good. And our good friend Robin, it would be on her list as well, because even I remember when she was reading it and going, she liked Empire Silence, was like, oh my god, Hard and Dark is so good. It's unbelievably good.
Nice.
Let me get a hold of Robin. Where is she? Robin, where have you been?
Yeah. She'd be up still.
All right, Varsha, it's time.
I think I'm going to steal Jared's thunder with Deadhouse Gates.
I think so too.
What?
Yeah.
What? Is this the bit where you flip and do the reverse and say it's not Deadhouse Gates? Is that what you've just done? Damn it.
No. It's Deadhouse Gates. It has a lot of gritty moments. It introduces my favorite, one of my favorite duos in the series. It has a very deep, heart-rending story about a 15-year-old, and it tells us the story of a most grueling sequence of battles, the chain of dogs from the eyes of a historian, and it does all that brilliantly. Like, this one didn't... I think somebody said that a lot of the Malazan books could pretty much be sort of standalones, and I think this one kind of is, because it doesn't really pick up from where the second book left off. There are some familiar characters. So this book stands on its own as a fantastic book. Like, it doesn't even need its identity as a member of the series for it to hold up, and it's just a brilliant book overall. And interestingly, I didn't think much of it when I read it. Like, not that I disliked it, but in terms of my favorite Malazan books, Memories of Ice is the one I like best. But Deadhouse Gates, I almost kind of struggled through, in the sense that I took 6 or 7 months to finish, and so I thought maybe that's a symptom of my not liking the book too much, but it isn't at all, because as I've thought about it and marinated on what happened and the things that happen in the book, it just becomes, I think it holds up to a lot of thought. Like, and I did rate it 5 stars when I finished reading it. I did love the book when I finished it, but the fact that I took 6 months to do that, I thought said something. But what it said was, it takes a lot of deep thinking to get through the book. That's what it does. So Jared.
Yeah, no, me too. Just so everybody knows, Deadhouse Gates is definitely my number one. And it because of that very fact that it sticks with you for a very long time after you've finished reading it. I will never forget this book. I will never forget the events in this book. The Coltane and the chain of dogs, what happened to him, Fellison, what happened to her. It's a talking point for this book amongst all, not only book 2, but all spheres out there. And it's that powerful that it brings up those emotions from everybody who's ever read this book. And I think it's really important as a second book in the series because it's the book where, like in the first book, Gardens of the Moon, Erickson he uses that, in media res they call it, where he throws you into the middle of the action and he gives you an action-packed fantasy novel, and it's great. And it gives you a lot of little hints about what's going to come later in the future, and that's great. And those little hints, if you're paying attention in the books later on, you can say, oh yeah, he actually mentioned that in Garden to the Moon. You won't get it the first time you read it, most likely, but you will if you follow along with our read along. But in Deadhouse Gates, though, Erickson went beyond just telling a really cool epic fantasy story. He told a story that has so much depth, so much heart to it. When you get into these characters' heads and you follow along with these characters, you are crying with them, you're laughing with them, your heart is broken for what they're going through. You don't even like half the characters, but you can't help but want to know how they're going to deal with this, how they're going to get through with it. And it's some of the stuff that happens is brutal, it's heartbreaking, but it's also the way that they relate to each other, and you want to just grab them and hold them and say, it's okay, I'll take care of you, but you can't, and it breaks your heart. And it's just, it can bring tears to your eyes if you're not prepared to what you're going to read here, and in a good way, not like I'm just sad. I'm moved, I'm fulfilled, and I am completely invested in what is going on in this world at this point. Gardens of the Moon is great, but it doesn't do what this book does. And this book is what made me realize I was going to go through this whole 10-book huge journey, because it's huge, it's long, it's over 3 million words, and it will take you a long time to get through it. But this book, if you can handle it, if you enjoy it, it's what's going to make you get through the rest of it. And that is why it is the greatest second book ever, period. And I will not back down from that. That is it.
Say what you really think. Just,
Barsha just nodding the whole time you're talking.
She knows.
Yes. That was so eloquent and well put, Jared. That was brilliant. Thank you.
Steve asked, so I had to tell him.
Yeah. You've been lots of things on my list. If we weren't doing a Malazan read along, then we would be after that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll go back to the list, and we'll go back to Drew. His number 1, Blackest Heart by Brian Lee Dufresne. The Five
Durfee.
Warrior Angels.
Yeah, Durfee. Yeah.
Oh, Durfee, sorry.
Yep.
Let's see, Thomas J. Devins, his number 1, A Ritual of Flesh by Lee C. Conley. And our friend Alex, his number 1, and he calls it his contentious choice, Ready Player 2 by Ernest Cline. No series name I know of. I just like this book. It has its bits set in Middle Earth and the Battle of the Seven Princes. That's 7 incarnations of a singer, not 7 mythical princes. How can anyone dislike it?
Sounds like Alex.
I like the first book a lot. I haven't read the second book, so I'll reserve judgment.
Yeah, the second book, from what I've seen, is very divisive, but Not for Alex. So
Not for Alex. Man's got good taste, so I believe Alex.
he does. Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna go with Alex over all these other people. I don't know.
Nobody's.
Yeah, what do they know? Nothing. That's what.
Yes, nothing. One left.
One left. My number one, and this was an easy one. When I came up with this idea, well, I didn't come up with this idea. We actually talked about it one day. I forget how it came up. It came up as after the episode kind of topic, and as soon as we mentioned it, I knew what my number one would be. There was no question. Which is Kings of Ash. It's the second book of the Ash and Sand trilogy by Richard Nell. Now, Kings of Paradise, and if I'm a second Apocalypse stan, Prince of Nothing stan, if that's number one, this is 1B. Ash and Sand is 1B for me.
Wow.
It is, so Kings of Paradise sets up two different characters, and lots of things happen in the first book. In the second book, there's things that happen in the second book, and I don't want to spoil it, but at the end, it'll stick with you because of the choices that were made and the risks that were taken that you rarely see in fantasy books. You really see this kind of tragedy and death, and it'll just crush you at the end of the second book. It'll just crush you because you get attached to these characters, you get attached to their journey, and then they're just gone. Like a couple of them, like maybe one, maybe more are just gone. So it just kind of leaves you thinking what's going to happen next. And it's kind of like with George R. R. Martin, no one's safe. Anything can happen. Any character can die. That's the feeling you get from this series. And you think things just go, when things go wrong, when characters make mistakes, when they make wrong moves, they pay for it. They don't have second chances. When they make a mistake, people die or they die. And there's plans that were set in motion in the first book come to fruition in the second book, and it doesn't work out quite the way you or the characters thought that it would. So it is a wonderful second book, and Ash and Sand is a great series if you can handle it. The first book starts off with the character eating another person, so that's kind of gives you an idea of the tone. But so it's not like a second Apocalypse, but it is very violent and unforgiving. But the second book, like I said, is just one of my all-time favorite books because of the chances it takes and the choices that were made. Like I said, so that's my number one.
Nice.
Awesome.
Yeah,
That's
another
fun.
one to add to the list. Yeah, for sure.
Wait, and we didn't talk for 2 hours? What? We got through the list so quick.
Hey, we're not done yet.
We're not?
I thought we did talk once. Oh, are we
Now
going to
for-
do more honorable
I
mentions?
was going to say, now for Porsche's sub-list of honorable mentions.
We could. I hate to be negative, but we could do like most disappointing book twos. Just throw it in there.
Interesting.
Wow.
Someone's prepared.
Oh no! Wow. Don't do it,
Oh,
Chris.
you want the children of ruin.
It's fine, but Children of Time is so fantastic.
Yeah, it's hard to follow up a book like Children of Time.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think if there was any second book that disappointed me. Maybe. But I don't keep track of series I didn't enjoy or didn't like very much. So, I do keep track of all the series I finished though. So maybe, let's see.
Any disappointments for second books, Jared?
Jeez. I don't know. Well, I don't know if it was disappointing as much as just didn't live up to the first book. Was Dune Messiah. I love the first book so much, and every book after that was kind of like, it's good, but not there. You know what I mean? I like all the Dune books, but the first one, Dune, is the best by far for me. and so it just didn't live up to what the first book. Not that I don't like it, I do like it, but not as Dune is definitely the first book is the best by far. I guess I would also say Return of the Crimson Guard in Elon Esimon's series, Novels of the Malazan Empire. I actually liked it better on second read because I got a lot more out of it, and I got a lot more Malazan nuggets, whereas the first time I didn't, because I just didn't pick up on them. But it is his most disjointed book in how it's structured, and it's his most confusing one. And all the books he wrote after it are fantastic. Stonewielder and Orbs Up the Throne and Blood and Bone and Assail in that series, they're all great. 3, 4, 5, 6 in that series, they're really good. And so it's almost like Return of the Crimson Guard. He was just finding his style, and so it's not as good. But I don't know if saying it's a disappointment is not accurate. I guess it's still cool. It's still cool as hell. I read it twice, so it's got to be good. But it definitely has problems compared to the other books he's written later on. He definitely has become quite the awesome writer since then. But a second book that I would have, I can't think of anything that a second book that made me like drop a series or something like that. I'm trying to think of something that actually made me mad or just made me say I'm not going on or something like that. But I can't offhand. You have to give me a minute with that one.
Nothing coming to mind for me, I have to say.
The only one I can think of is Tower Lord. This is the second book in the Raven Shadow trilogy, just because it's such a departure from the first book. It's a very, very different focus on the second book. So it's still good. I still liked it, but it's very abrupt. It's a change. Yeah.
Interesting.
Here's an unpopular opinion before we go. One of my, I don't say my favorite, but a series that is, I think is, I would safe to say, very divisive, which is the Poppy War. I think the second book, The Dragon Republic, is the best book in that series.
Wow. My wife
and nearly made my
that
top.
series.
Yeah. It is the second book I thought was great. So
interesting. Yeah. My wife devoured that series. Bought her the first book to get her, see if she would like it, and she was about halfway through it, and the 3 books came in at once because it was cheaper to buy the 3 books. So they just landed in from Amazon. She was like, I just can't stop. This is and she just burned through them.
Nice. I've been meaning to read that. I'm glad she likes it, because she was right about the discovery of witches, which we were.
Oh, right.
So maybe Poppy War I might enjoy.
yeah. Anything you can think of, Varsha? Anything else?
I scoured my completed series list, and I don't have any disappointing second books. But I think I'm not doing a good job of keeping track of series I've completed, because I have as many favorites as I have completed series, and I'm certain there is a disconnect between the two. Like, there is a gap. I don't favorite every single series I read, even though it sounds like it's not true. But anyway, no, I do not have any disappointing second books.
Second books are tough. So yeah, good stuff. And No, we have to figure out how to get Donaldson on
Yeah.
on one of these wheels.
Yes.
Because I'm sold.
Yeah. Maybe after Wars of Light and Shadow, maybe? Or...
Oh, you mentioned Realm of the Elderlings after that, but
yes, Realm of the Elderlings. So, yeah.
Well, why, Jerry?
Remember Sauron Thorm? You know? So lots of options.
It was like a 12-book series.
I know, it's crazy.
Can we not do like a book that's the
60.
series is a book and a half or something? 60 pages long each.
That'd be nice.
Yes. Oh yeah, three discussions in one.
Yeah.
That might actually get more views because people like it when you talk about multiple books in one video. Except we'll talk for 3 hours.
Like, if anybody's still here, we're not doing it for the views, obviously.
No.
We would be the worst at whatever, if that's what our objective was.
Yeah, what are we, the fun tubers? Is that
Fun tubers, that's us.
That's the term?
For the definitions. I've been called a lot worse.
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah. Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, if anyone's still here, to give us your top 5, and there's a link down below to send us a message, or you come by the forums and give us your top 5 series, talk about it, and defend them to the death, and tell us what you love. I'd like to hear it. So until next time, Varsha, where can people find you?
On my YouTube channel, Reading by the Rainy Mountain, where I also post our podcast discussions from Speculative Speculations, and I hang out on Steve's podcast sometimes, and on Jared's channel sometimes.
And Chris is too busy to do his own channel.
Yeah. I can't even post our own videos on there at the moment. It's like, what the hell?
And I keep Chris busy with all the discussions.
I even see Varsha forgot to post one of the videos on her own channel this week until later.
I did. Yes, I did.
Yeah.
I did. I didn't make a thumbnail in time. And I'll do it tomorrow. It's fine.
Yes. And Chris, where can people find you?
Hey, you can find me on Varsha's channel, on Jared's channel, on Steve's channel, and sometimes on my own channel at the Chronicle of Chris, alongside the Speculative Speculations podcast on the Page 2 forums.
And Jared, where can people find you?
I am on the Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel, where I often have multiple guests, sometimes on different things.
And some people who invite themselves to discussions like me.
Yeah, you'll see Varsha on there sometime soon. And Speculative Speculations, of course, because that is a great podcast. Everybody should check out.
One of the best, I hear.
We have a lot of fun there. And other page-chewing podcasts. I can't wait to talk about Swamp Thing.
Yes.
Oh, yes. That's coming up.
You know, it just occurred to me, should we just create one channel? Just do it on one channel.
One channel where we post all our stuff. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. I like that.
That'd be a lot of posts, yeah.
Yes.
It would be. Yeah.
two videos every day.
Yeah,
it could be.
Yeah.
Is that not how you get views, though? Is it? I don't know.
We've already established we don't give a shit about it.
Yeah.
A lot less work.
Yeah.
What are you talking about, Chris?
But, well, Jared does. That's what he's trying to upgrade to the better friends. But yeah.
We'll make all the other people look bad.
Yeah, so if you are looking for me, find me on pagetrain.com, on Speculative Speculations, best places to find me, and come and say hello in the forums and join us for fun discussions like this. So until next time, hope everyone has a great week, and we will see everyone very soon.